Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another episode of Buha's Block. On today's show, I am thrilled to be joined by Tim, aka Cranjis McBasketball of the Lakers Exceptionalism pod. Anytime Tim is on the show, you know it's a big deal. Tim, how are you doing?
Jovan, I am excited for basketball. This is my favorite time of year. Love, pulling out the whiteboard, pulling out the clipboards, just digging into all these matchups. It's a good time to enjoy some basketball. I'm glad that we have a little bit of a break between cramming for these podcasts and then seeing the Lakers play so I can enjoy some of these other series. But I'm also going to be very antsy at the same time and having to force myself to stop looking at film before we actually see what these teams actually do in game one. But I don't know, man. I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm happy to be here. The team looks very different from the last time we talked, and much more excited for now and the future.
Before we dive into this series, I'm curious, how have you been going about preparing for it? Because we really don't have much of a sample size. The season series, 3 of the games were from mid-December on, so they all featured Anthony Davis, Max Christie, Cam Reddish, D'Lo. LeBron missed one of the games. Only one game post Luka, but even that was like 2 weeks post Luka trade. No Rudy Gobert or Julius Randle. Rui got injured in that game. Ant got tossed in the third quarter. So from a season series perspective, we are entering this matchup relatively blind. And then even when looking at some of the season numbers, like Minnesota has been a much better team post All-Star break. The Lakers have obviously gone through their several iterations of this group. And then even within the post All-Star identity, have been without Rui and LeBron for quite a while there. So how did you go about kind of preparing for, I know you just did a preview pod, but for today's show, like how have you got about trying to dig into how this series might actually go?
Yeah, it's been a lot of looking at what do they want to do on their end? What do the Lakers want to do on our end? And just seeing what is their style of play? What with the rotation they're going to have? How will we probably match up? We don't know for sure, but what might we do based on player roles and tendencies and positions guarded? Looking at their offense stylistically, what do they like to do? Specifically looking at specific sets they run and actions they run and tendencies of certain players. And then looking at the Lakers defense, all right, well, how do we defend this? How do we defend that? Okay, they're a big ISO team. How do we defend isolations? And we saw some of that against Ant in the game for LA before Ant was tossed. But in other games against other ISO squares, we've seen similar defense from LA. So I have a good feel for how the Lakers will respond. And then from there, it's looking at, well, how has Minnesota, beyond just playing LA, when have they faced similar types of defense? And then what have they done about it? And then looking at the Lakers, how do they respond to it? And so it's a lot of that back and forth, digging into film and looking for when these teams have been asked similar tactical questions. Because I think for me, a series is a journey, a series is a book to be written, and how quickly you flip from chapter to chapter tactically can really matter. If we end up with Minnesota switching in game 1 versus switching in game 5 versus switching in game 7, the series can be in a very different place. And so understanding how many cards you have to play, which is a combination of the players and talents they have, but then also as a coaching staff, understanding how to use them. I want to get a feel for how deep the bag is for each of these coaches and where things might evolve. So it's a lot. It's certainly a hypothesizing exercise. I've certainly been burned in the past. Frank Vogel offensive game plans did not usually match up with what I had in mind. Frank Vogel defensive game plans usually did, and so it was kind of good enough. When things, when the staff's seeing what I'm seeing, it makes for fun content, and then the people listening will be like, oh, I'm seeing it live because you kind of prepped me for it. When we're misaligned, I'd sound crazy. So I'm hoping me and JJ are on the same page here, and the staff, and on the Finch's side, they're a good group as well. So that's kind of how I approach it, and just trying to dig into similar comparable scenarios, because we don't, like you said, we don't really have something to point at and say, this is what these two teams give you when you stick them together with these current iterations.
It's well said. And yeah, I think a big thing for me was going back, watching some of the film from the Western Conference Finals and just seeing how they guarded Luka, what they were trying to do, some differences with how the Lakers and the Mavericks function offensively, but there are some similarities as well. Then looking at some Julius film, some Ant film, against the Lakers in the regular season. And even though in some of those matchups there were, if it's like 80 on Julius or Max Christie or Cam on Ant, like you can't necessarily apply that to how the Lakers are going to guard them now. But I think you could take some stuff from the February 27th matchup with Ant, and then earlier in the season, just kind of what they were trying to do against Julius, where they were trying to shade him. But the format for today's show is going to be similar to our show last year, which is going to be one question for the Lakers, one question for the Wolves, one player X factor for the Lakers, one player X factor for the Wolves, a statistical X factor, and then a series X factor. That could be a tactical thing, or just a larger question that didn't necessarily fit into one of the previous segments. And then final thing will be series prediction. So let's start with the first thing. What is your biggest question for the Lakers entering this series?
I think this Lakers team, even in the short time that we've seen them post Luka acquisition, they've created pretty strong identities for me on both sides of the court, offensively, defensively. They know what they want to do. They know how to get into it. And Minnesota is kind of similar. They've been very consistent throughout the season. Their rotation's pretty rigid and straightforward. But for LA, my question is more so on the coaching staff. Like, how deep is that tactical bag for JJ? I know what I've seen them do in the regular season checkers match, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way towards him. I just mean, like, in the regular season, there's only so much you can do. There's only so deep you can go, and you're only usually playing one game against a team at a time, and then you see them a couple months later. And so we won't see the level of preparation, the level of detail in the game planning, and how that evolves the same way you will in a series where you're playing the same team over and over and over again, and especially a series like this where there's so much time in between each game. So this is it's just a different kind of game. And there are and have been coaches and teams that are really good regular season teams that just aren't strong tactically, and then they underperform in the playoffs. I remember being a little worried about Memphis a couple of years ago, and then we saw them, and they just weren't making the adjustments that I felt were obvious, and they just didn't get to them until too late, and then by that point, the series was over. We saw, like, the Lakers, the title year, play Houston, Mike D'Antoni. We went to a zone, and they couldn't figure out how to beat a zone, and the series was over way quicker than I thought it should have been. So there are times where teams underperform. There are other times where they can really trade blows with you. Mike Malone was really good at that. Eric Spoelstra was really good at that. I don't know how good JJ and his staff will be. And an example, I guess, for what this looks like in a specific sense is we've seen the Lakers use what they call their green help defense successfully in the regular season against perimeter isolation options, where they're kind of shading you towards the sideline. They're sinking into gaps. They'll even rotate a player over to the strong side block, and they're doing everything they can to deter drives from the perimeter and try to induce you into settling for pull-up jumpers, which if Minnesota were to do that, I'd be really happy with the series. It can be countered. Anytime you are allocating extra attention in that way, it's vulnerable. It just takes the other team to respond to it with help beaters and try to take advantage of that. You might get good shots at the rim. You might get some catch and shoot threes. There are things they can do with pin and flares, with cuts and stuff like that. We haven't seen LA really need to go to a plan B or a plan C with this coverage this regular season. And so I just truly do not know how JJ and his staff will respond. I don't know if they're going to, and especially because this isn't a team that's like some of the elite defensive teams in history where 1 through 5 you switch and you're also like, you don't have any weak points. This group has some weaker points if you can peel away the help defense and play them 1v1. So how do the Lakers respond if that plan A, green, as they call it, help defense isn't successful? Do they switch to zone? Do they make small switches to it and play similar type of help defense? Or do they start double teaming? Do they just start benching guys? What do they do? I don't know. I truly don't know. And so I think figuring out how he and his staff respond this series will tell us a lot about the potential for this team long term in the playoffs. But it can also, if this goes poorly, this could be a huge benefit for Minnesota. So it's very much a question mark. It is the biggest question mark. JJ has answered so many questions from when you and I spoke a couple pods ago, and we were trying to hypothesize what this team could look like. this is the one big one that's remaining. This is really the only one that's remaining, and you can argue it's one of the most important.
What would you do if their initial defensive coverages against Ant don't work?
I think it depends on what the specifics are. A couple of ways that this could be attacked by Minnesota. I think one thing in general would be anytime you're shading over like this and guys aren't in their normal shell defense, you're in worse rebounding position. And so if LA's forcing those pull-up jumpers, they're kind of getting the win on the initial shot, but it's resulting in Rudy Gobert being able to kind of get free reign to crash to the rim and get some boards, and you're getting killed on second chance opportunities. You could still try to shade with that front line on the perimeter, but keep your back line in its normal place. If that's not the case, and it's been more like making the pass to Dante DiVincenzo, who's shooting, I think it's 47 or 48% on spot-up threes this season on 190 attempts. If it's just the simple stuff like that, and you need to change up what you're doing there, it could look like maybe not shading as much from the perimeter and pre-rotating on the back line. It could look like something. Minnesota's not a great playmaking team across the board. Maybe it's get the ball out of Ant's hands with the right lineups out there for them that you feel comfortable that they're not going to make quick decisions, and then you try to scramble and rotate. There's a lot that you can do. I think it depends on what the specifics are. If they're using like pin and flare screens, I think there are little tweaks with player positioning to try to counteract that. So I don't think this is I'm trying not to give you a cop-out answer, but it really depends.
No, and what do you think of? So JJ has laid out his plan for the week a little bit. They took Monday off. Tuesday was just let's get back into the gym and do some shooting drills, some conditioning stuff. Let's focus more on ourselves and regrouping. Then after practice, they had a late practice. It was at 4 p.m. Then they watched the Warriors Grizzlies playing game all together as a group. We just learned today that JJ gave a motivational speech and that Austin Reeves was joking with him. Like, how many times did you practice that? He was like, 0. It came from the heart. So apparently it was like some epic motivational speech similar to the one that he gave before the season when they all met for a team dinner and JJ laid out everyone's roles and responsibilities and all that. So that's kind of been leading into today, which was the first time they started actually game planning for Minnesota on the court. We also learned that Brodie James and Shake Milton were the Ant Edwards role in the against the scout team. So going through some of Minnesota's offense today, and then JJ's talked about like sprinkling in stuff progressively throughout the week leading into Saturday. But what do you think of that approach? And then he also mentioned, because I asked him yesterday, just like we've seen him do these like one-off, really impressive game plans against teams with like 1 to 2 days to prep. So like, what's that going to look like with 5 days to prep, 6 days to prep? And he said the biggest thing has just been getting organized and making sure he's got a clear and concise game plan, and then figuring out the best way to communicate that to the team, and then splitting that up day by day, giving them little bits of information. Just hearing, I guess, some of that. What have you made of JJ's plan going into game one?
I like it. I think that's the right way to build. You kind of start internally, and then you look at the foe that you're facing and figure out how to build out the game plan. And you don't want to throw too much at the players too quickly. You can certainly overload your players, and that's not what you want to do. You can have a perfect game plan, but if communicated the wrong way, or you're trying to do a million things well instead of 10 things well, you might lose value in the execution of the game plan. So at a high level, it makes sense. It's kind of what I've experienced when I've played and been on teams or been around teams in high school and in college, getting in a playoff environment. So it's what I'm familiar with. So it sounds comfortable to me. I'm sure other teams may do it other ways, but it seems like a fairly standard approach. And I think the right way to approach things, you kind of want to build up to that final matchup and, take it as slow as you need to make sure that each layer that you're adding on is understood and you can execute it. You want to kind of check that they've got it before you throw another 3 things at them.
My question for the Lakers in this series is, how do their centerless looks fare against the Wolves bigs? And I think that this is in some ways a continuation of your question or your focus on the Lakers defense against Ant, because to your point, if the Lakers are shading over toward Ant, that is going to create some cross match opportunities, that is going to create situations where guys aren't necessarily close to a Wolves offensive player in terms of making that contact and boxing out. And Rudy Gobert in the regular season matchups for, again, whatever it's worth, averaged 4 offensive rebounds per game against the Lakers, and 3 of those games AD played in. Like, if I'm the Wolves and I'm looking at this matchup and how to keep Rudy on the floor and maximize his effectiveness, I am going to look to crash the offensive glass hard. And they have several guys in Rudy, Nas, Julius Randle, Jaden McDaniels, even some of their perimeter guys in Na and Dante. All those guys can crash. And I think we've seen sometimes, especially like going back to the Warriors matchup a few weeks ago, where the Lakers can sometimes struggle, especially with crashing guards and just tracking those guys on the perimeter. So I think this will get into like my big series question. So I want to try to refrain from that. But I think that there is going to be an interesting chess match here between, we know LA wants to play these centerless, JJ calls it the lasers lineup with DFS, Rui, and the big 3. And they've done well against big teams. They did well against OKC, did well against Houston, Memphis, Dallas. So like, we've seen them force teams to adjust to them. But I think Minnesota, especially with having this much time to prep and having the offensive rebounding talent that they have and just the collective size that they have, I think they can make their own game plan to exploit the Lakers' defensive rebounding. And just of note, recently, excluding the Portland game, which I will erase from my memory, 3 of the Lakers' last 6 games to close out the regular season, they allowed 14 or more offensive rebounds. So those were all games that like they were trying to win because of the standings and seeding and whatnot. So this can be a bit of an issue for them in terms of allowing offensive rebounds. And I just think how guys like LeBron and Rui and DFS are faring on the back line, not just from like a help perspective, but specifically from protecting the rim and crashing and boxing out. Like they're going to need to be engaged defensively on every single possession and sandwich rebound and all that stuff. So I think that's a big thing of if Minnesota can crash the glass and punish them for going smaller at times and force Jaxson maybe to play more or them to go to Vando instead, and then that changes the dynamic of the offense. Like I just think that chess match to me is going to be a big thing for LA.
Yeah, I certainly think so, and I won't spoil one of my later answers, but rebounding is something I'm concerned about, and if LA is forced into certain personnel, I think that's a bad sign. If Minnesota is forced into certain personnel, I think that's a bad sign. Getting back to my how deep is JJ's tactical bag? If your help defense isn't working and then your answer is start benching guys, I think that's a bad sign. Or if it's go to zone, I think that's a bad sign. There are smaller tweaks you would want to make. Same sort of thing with rebounding. There are little tactics you can use, like the sandwich rebounding like you talked about, or try not to leak out and transition quite as much. You can try to do little things around the margins, but at the end of the day, you can't scheme your way out of a big size disadvantage. And LA's not a small team, but
no,
Minnesota's got a huge center, and he's really good at. There have been matchups this year where he's looked unstoppable, and they're getting 35% of their misses, and that's going to be, I think, a key part of any series path to victory for Minnesota is when the possession battle, and that's turnovers, but then also the offensive rebounds, and especially with how I expect LA to try to guard Ant. With that extra help, it will make them even more vulnerable against this team and against their players that are most likely going to be close to the rim. And to your point on the crashing, Minnesota this season ranks 11th in crashing depth, according to the metrics we have at Bball Index, but there are specific individual players that are very, very high. And that's absolutely a threat. That needs to be something JJ's showing the team on film is just look at this time. This guy was nowhere close to the play, and he was able to get 2 feet from the rim because his man didn't check to see if he was crashing and then box him out. I don't need to see a body on a body every time, but I need to see every Lakers player check to see if their man is going to crash when a shot goes up. If they're not going to crash, great, then turn around, try to help someone else, or at least control an area. If your man does crash, then you need to hit him. You need to put a body on him, do it legally, but if those heads aren't turning, then LA's not doing their jobs. And when they get lazy, they're not a great defense, especially when you don't have the size to be able to make up for it. And that is going to take a lot of, mental focus, play in and play out, lineup after lineup, game after game. And this is something that could wear down on you if you're Minnesota. And rebounding, offensive rebounding, and put back fouls are also a big thing when we look at fouling and play types. So that could be a concern as well if you're picking up cheap fouls because you're either trying to box out illegally or you're allowing those offensive rebounds and needing to hack at them to not give up dunks. So I really like that from you.
Yeah, like I think the Lakers can do it, to be clear, and that's why, spoiler alert, I'm going to pick them to win this series. I just think to the point you just made, like, it is very mentally and physically taxing, and we've seen this group go through defensive lulls where they don't want to do the hard things, and I think given the playoff atmosphere and circumstance and context, like, they will be locked in to do those things. But I just think with Minnesota's physicality and the ability for several of their role players to continually crash, that's just going to test the Lakers' defensive disposition. And I think they're going to have to be locked in again on every single possession on that end, because I don't think they have the same margin for error that some teams have on that end. So that's just going to be something for me to monitor. But what's your question for the Wolves?
My question for Minnesota it's a pretty simple one, and it is one that doesn't take LA doing anything fancy on the offensive end, but how do you as Minnesota defend the Lakers without conceding just obvious mismatches between perimeter isolations, post-ups, and ball screens? Because especially with the starting lineup on the court, you've got three guys with Luka, Austin, and LeBron that are great ISO options. Also, those same three guys are great pick and roll options. And then sub Austin out, put Rui in, or not in the lineup, but looking at Rui, Luka, and LeBron, you have three good post options. Some of them better than others, but three guys that can, go beat Mike Conley in the post or go beat some of these smaller Minnesota defenders in the post. And so I don't know how Minnesota tries to allocate their resources. I've seen so many different ideas thrown out there. I think there are several potential viable paths, but you cannot plug all of those holes. And if LA just wants to be super pinpoint and focused and say, like, we're going to go hunt the mismatch, they're going to have options. Like, pick a guy. They've got something that they're not great at. Julius Randle, he can stay in front decently on the perimeter. He can hold his own down low. He is not a screen navigator. That's going to be a problem for him if you try to match him up on any of the ball handlers that I talked about. Jaden McDaniels, very well-rounded defender, a guy that perennially is a first-team all-defense, second-team all-defense contender. But we saw with that last Luka matchup in the playoffs last year that between all the fouls he was racking up and Luka's success, he was not a good matchup for Luka and ended up having to be pulled from that assignment by game 4 when the team was down 3-0. He isn't the best screen navigator. I watched a lot of film on him trying to navigate double drag, and he was falling over like a pinball. So I feel like that could be a good advantage, even if he's a good ISO defender, maybe not the best Luka ISO defender, but also not the best screen navigator. And I mean, pick a Minnesota defender. There are holes in their game. And so if you just attack the right matchups at the right time, instead of trying to be very stubborn and say, let's go take on their best ISO guy with ISO game or go take on their good post defenders with post ups, LA should just have some natural advantages lineup to lineup throughout the 48-minute games. And that is something that, like, the X's and O's you can really, really, think about and try to cancel out. But at the end of the day, if our dudes are better than your dudes and you can't stop them 1v1 or in these very simple actions, that's a nice fallback option for the Lakers, with under 10 seconds left on the shot clock.
This is why I've been so bullish on the Lakers offense, and I think we've started to see it trend in that direction, because I think the first month or so with Luka, it was a pretty middling to sometimes even subpar offense, just in terms of offensive rating, and they were a much stronger defensive team than offensive team. But more recently, they've been a top 10 offense, and I think you've seen some regression positively from the shot making from the supporting cast. But you've also just seen they could just mismatch hunt against anybody with Luka, Austin, and or LeBron. Like, one of those three is always going to have some type of advantage. And I think they've needed a certain level of reps and just experience to figure out the best ways to use each of those guys in various situations and various coverages. But yeah, I mean, the Wolves don't have a lot of great options. And it's weird because on paper, you look at them and they are a good defensive team. They have a lot of good defensive players. And especially if Mike Conley ultimately is minimized, like I think that's the one guy that at 6 feet, 6'1", like he's going to be the duck out there. He's going to be the guy that anytime he's on the floor, the Lakers are going to be targeting him, whether it's a mismatch, like he's on Rui and they're just looking for deep seals and post ups, or even if he's on Austin, then you're going to see LeBron come screen for him. And it's either, okay, you're giving Austin an advantage or now Mike Conley switching onto LeBron, and then that's a mismatch. So I think Lakers have a lot of entry points into their defense, which is partly why I'm so bullish on their offense in this series and their ability to win it. And this is along the lines of my question. My question was just like, how are they going to guard Luka? And I think that to me is the thing that will determine kind of the rest of the offense. Because to your point, obviously going back to the conference finals last year, they started with Jaden McDaniels. They eventually shifted Kyle Anderson more onto Luka, and then Ant got the assignment in game 4 when they were down 3-0. He guarded him the final couple games in that series. Then going back to the LA matchup on February 27th, Ant started on Luka, and they would occasionally switch McDaniels or Nah or someone else onto him. But Ant had the primary assignment against Luka, and then they had Jaden McDaniels on Jaxson to switch the 1-5 pick and roll. So if we take that at face value and say, okay, theoretically, Ant is going to start on Luka and maybe McDaniels is on Jaxson to kind of neutralize that. Well, then you have these ripple effects of like, okay, so is it Rudy on Rui? And there's different things the Lakers can do there with like his positioning along the 3-point arc. I guess Randle on LeBron and then Conley on Austin. So maybe that's how they start. You could go more traditional with like McDaniels on Luka, but then where's Ant? Is he on LeBron? Is he on Austin? Like there's no real good spot for Mike Conley. I think that's kind of the glaring thing there. Or you could try and put like McDaniels on Austin and sort of try to take Austin out and say maybe Ant on Luka, Randle on LeBron. But like, I just don't, I think how they defend Luka and how much they're switching versus drop. I assume Rudy will be in a drop. Nas and Randle will probably be switching on to him. But like that to me is the thing that like has the ripple effect throughout LA's offense and just how they attack them.
Yep. Yeah. They don't have to try to play calculus to manufacture mismatches. You're going to have them just as is. Just find the right one. When we saw Ant be Luka's primary defender in that series last playoffs, he had 5 fouls. That was the only game all series that he was in any foul trouble. He had 1 or 2 every other game of the series. The one time he was the primary on Luka, he was very much in foul trouble. So that is something that would be a nightmare scenario for Minnesota this year and something they might be a little hesitant to do. So I do wonder how they deploy him. Conley, another one that I agree with you, like defensively, he's the guy to go after. I think he is much more likely to be played off the court than Rudy Gobert is, honestly. And if he does, and you throw one of those bench guys in, DiVincenzo or not, I think that impacts the offense for Minnesota. Conley is one of their best playmakers. He is like, not a super elite playmaker, but for this team, he's one of their better ones. And we do see a tangible impact for Rudy Gobert, his involvement, his shots at the rim, and his point production with Mike Conley on the court versus off the court. And so I wonder about if Gobert is losing some of his value offensively and just the offense in general with how Conley is worse. Is it worth the defensive boost you get? And is it worth messing up the identity of this bench group that Minnesota's had? And if you look at their rotation map throughout the season, they've been pretty consistent and like guys know when to stand up and check into the games. They don't have to be told. They've been very structured with how they do things. Whereas LA's had to kind of live in this season of turmoil and constant adjusting. And so I do wonder how stubborn Minnesota will be to keep being who they've been and playing the way they've played and keep the rotation the way it's been. And if and when they do have to change it, how comfortable are they playing with some of these, not necessarily new lineups, but certainly not getting as many reps as they could have if this team did kind of try out more different iterations throughout the season.
I will note too that looking at their post All-Star break rotation, Conley is 8th in minutes. So I feel like already they've been preparing to phase him out. Like they basically have an 8-man rotation, 8 to 9, depending on the night, but when fully healthy. And it's the starters plus DiVincenzo, and Naz Reid. And so since the last couple months, he's been averaging about 24 minutes a game, 8th in the rotation. So it feels like I would not be surprised if at some point they have to bench him and just start or DiVincenzo. And I think to your point, like that is a win for the Lakers in some regards. Defensively, they should be better and should be more switchable and bigger and more disruptive. But offensively, he is the primary pick and roll partner for Rudy Gobert. They have history going back to Utah. And if you are neutralizing Gobert a little bit offensively, just in terms of his role, I think that potentially puts you down the path of him again, not necessarily being like played off the floor, but maybe being played into a slightly smaller role. But who is your Lakers X factor?
Yeah, so I guess kind of along the same lines with Conley, he was 7th pre All-Star break in minutes, now 8th, so he's down a little bit on their team. Jaxson Hayes is someone that I don't think most listeners were expecting me to name here, but is someone that we've also seen phased out a bit with the Lakers more recently, and he is someone that has some size. I think rebounding is going to be really important in this series, and when we look at where Jaxson Hayes is effective offensively and defensively, on defense, they're willing to switch with him. I don't necessarily think the style of play LA plays defensively is going to matter too much for his minutes, but offensively, when they are facing switching defenses, he loses a lot of value. He is someone that is not a post scorer. It looks really ugly if he's posting me up or you up or Mike Conley up, and because of that, you lose a lot with him. When teams are switching, they get underneath his roles. He doesn't do anything. He's there for putbacks. He's there for offensive rebounds. That's it. And he just kind of hurts your spacing a little bit. And so when facing switching defenses, LA's taken him out and they've gone different directions. When they're facing drop defenses, he's not a pick and pop option. And so they've gone also to different guys. They've gone more to DFS or Rui or LeBron pick and pop options. But against hedging defenses and blitzing defenses, that is where we've seen Jaxson Hayes' minutes, it's their highest. And looking at every game of the season and really every game post Luka acquisition, there's a very clear relationship between LA facing teams that hedge more and Hayes playing more, and LA facing teams that switch more and Hayes playing less. And when we look at how Minnesota has operated the season and just like what do they normally do, how do they normally play, they have ranked 8th in the NBA this season in hedging, in blitzing combined. It's the thing they do most. They're 9th in drop in the league, and I don't expect them to drop a ton against Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves. I think LA would be happy with that, and they don't switch much at all. 27th in the league. Rudy Gobert, 4% of the time he's switching on ball screens. This is not a team that wants to switch with their starting group. Some of their bench guys, Naz Reid, they'll switch a little bit more with. Randle, they'll switch more with. But when you've got those top, frontline guys out there, and you're pulling, running those 1-5 ball screens, you're just pulling Gobert into the action, you're going to get a hedge most often, and in this series specifically. And so because of that, in these kinds of matchups, we tend to see Hayes' minutes be in the mid to high 20s for minutes per game compared to the mid to high teens when you're facing more switching defenses, which is what LA's faced mostly in recent games. So the recent kind of environment has been not Hayes friendly, and that's why we've seen him play less. I think we're about to see him play more. I think this is a good Hayes series. And to the earlier point about rebounding that you made, I think he's a key part of that. I know he's not a great rebounder for his position, but when you take him out, you're an even worse rebounding team. DFS is good at a lot of things. He's a weak rebounder. LeBron, you can make the case that he'll turn it up in the playoffs. I hope to see it. In the regular season, he has not boxed out well. And when he's been on the court, the Lakers have, as a team, have been a much less successful defensive rebounding team when you adjust for lineups on both sides of the court, which we have in a metric at Bball Index. Rui, big body, can hold his own in the post a bit. On the boards, has been very, very poor as a wing stopper at winning contested battles. Vando, you worry about the offense and how he gets played off the court potentially, and against a hedging defense, I'd much rather have a lob threat than a guy that's going to have to catch and then finish below the rim or take a couple dribbles. So Hayes makes a lot of sense. He helps you on offense against this style of defense. He helps you on defense just closing possessions and really helps you take away or try to limit at least that one, to me, consistent part of any path to victory for Minnesota, which is winning that possession battle, getting those second chances. So to me, he is going to be a key guy. He's got to play well. We've seen stretches of this year where he's played well, other stretches where he's played poorly. I do think part of that has to do with the scheme and what situations he makes more and less sense for. But he better be ready to go, because if he's not, you're going to be small, and I think this is going to be a long series.
Two follow-ups to that quickly would just be, one, with Jaxson, we have seen more recently him not play as much in some of these bigger matchups against an OKC, a Houston, a Memphis, a Dallas, and it's been a little counterintuitive, but I've almost viewed it as like JJ being like, when we're playing bigger teams, we want to dictate the terms of engagement by going a bit smaller and forcing them to space out and play some of those bigs off the floor. And then when we're playing some of the smaller teams, we go a little bit bigger with Jaxson for longer shifts, and then we leverage his rim running and his lob, verticality around the basket. And you've seen him play sometimes a little bit more against bigger teams. So I guess what would you say to that? And then the second thing, if they force Minnesota to switching more, do you think that affects or impacts Jackson's potential role? Because I feel like against the Lakers, you almost have to switch. If you're dropping, it's death. If you're blitzing and hedging, that could also be death. Like, their personnel almost demands that you switch. Now, whether Minnesota can do that is a whole other question, and that's where I think some of the optimism for LA is. But like, I guess with Jaxson sometimes playing less against bigger teams and Minnesota potentially switching more in this series, how do you see those two factors potentially impacting that?
Yeah, really good questions. And I guess looking game by game, some of the OKC games, one of them was he played a good number of minutes and was a pretty high hedge and blitz game. One of the other games was very
quick
switch
note.
heavy.
I would say I believe that was no Rui in that game, the game that he played more, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that could be a good point. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I will concede that point. I did not think about that. Some of the other examples you listed were games where we did see a lot of switching. And in some of the hedge-heavy games, the Knicks, one of the OKC games, but to your point, it was against a team with a team without Rui. Some of the Clipper games, and then some other teams that just aren't great defensively. The Bulls, the Pelicans, the Spurs, the Suns, those just happen to be teams that also but hedged a lot. So maybe there's some team strength interaction here that I didn't consider as much as I should have. I did not adjust for that, but I do think that could be an interesting thing to keep an eye out for. And if this doesn't pan out the way I'm expecting, that could very much be a reason why I was playing too much into the coverages and not enough into the, are we willing to put him out there in big moments and big games? At the end of the day, in a closing lineup, I would be surprised if LA isn't in that smaller def lineup. Would you?
I agree. That's their five. They have their five.
So I think throughout 48 minutes, you're going to have to play him. I don't think you can be small the whole time. I wouldn't be surprised if they do close smaller. But I think that's a good point. And to your second question, if LA were to get Minnesota to the point where they are switching defensively, I think at that point that the Lakers are going to win the series. This is a Minnesota team that has a lot of good defenders that are good at what they're good at, and they're not good in other areas. They have guys that you can absolutely toast in the post. They have guys you can beat on the perimeter. They have guys that do not rotate well. And if you can get them into a switching mode where their job on defense becomes different from what it normally is, LA, to me, gains a whole lot of an edge offensively. And even if Hayes isn't a great switch beater, he takes away a little bit less for me compared to what you are gaining from that. And I think he will still be worth it on the defensive end of the court. That I do still think he may have a chance to play because of the offensive rebounding threat with Minnesota. But if they do go smaller, if Gobert's off the court, then I don't think you need Hayes out there nearly as much. But to me, the way, and I'm going to spoil a later answer, but Minnesota's going to do everything they can to not be a switching defense, I think. If we look at their plan A, their plan B, their plan C, their plan D, there are different routes they can go between soft hedging, hard hedging, blitzing, trying different things. I think switching is towards the bottom of their list, because if you can put some of their guys in on ball, some of their guys defending the rim, some of their guys standing in the corner, and you can kind of dictate who's where, they are not a good defensive team. And I think there's a really good reason they have not switched much this year. It's not because they just aesthetically think it's unpleasing. It's because they aren't good at it and are going to get toasted doing it, especially against a really, really strong 1v1 attacking group with LA on the ISOs, on the perimeter, and then also on the post. So would be worse for Hayes, but much better for LA big picture. And so I wouldn't mind if Hayes is on the bench and Minnesota switching and Gobert's on the bench. That's a huge win for me.
Yeah. So my player X factor for the Lakers is Rui. I look at Rui as someone who could get the Ant matchup to start. He could also get the Julius Randle matchup. He's defended Julius fairly well over the last 3 years. Looking at the NBA.com matchup data, which I know is not perfect. It's pulled from Synergy. He's allowed or held Julius to 39% shooting over the past 3 seasons. Has been a little bit better in terms of Julius's success over the past couple seasons. A lot of that was from the 2022-23 season. He held them to like 6 of 24 shooting in one-on-one situations. But I think Rui, his defensive versatility, I could see him being the primary guy that they're putting on Ant or Julius, especially when one of the two is off the floor, and they're kind of having him as that initial line of defense, and then having LeBron, DFS, Luka, Jaxson as the backline guys. And I'm sure Vando will get some reps. DFS will get some reps as the primary on-ball guys against some of them. But I think with the starting group, at least, we've seen that they have tried to put Rui on Ant. He's the one that guarded Ant primarily to start in the February matchup. So that's going to be something that I think is a big, just like how his performance, his defensive engagement is. I think he's done a much better job of being disciplined in terms of contesting without fouling and shading guys to certain spots. So how Rui holds up in those matchups, I think will be big. And then the other thing, of course, is just going to be his shooting. And in the season series, which again, I don't want to take away too much from, but he shot 18% against Minnesota, 4 games. There's some randomness there, small sample size, but Rui is the guy that, whether it's them potentially starting with Conley on him or them just having to make some tough decisions, like I could see Rui getting 6, 7, 8 open to semi-contested threes per game. And how, if he shoots 31% or he shoots 43%, like that could be its own swing factor. So I think Rui's utility on the defensive end, then also him battling in the paint, like there will be times maybe where they're going small against Rudy, and he's the guy who gets the Rudy matchup, and he's going to have to battle him in the paint. So I think his defense and rebounding, and then offensively, just the shot making, if Minnesota's ignoring him, can he make them pay with back cuts, some offensive rebounds, putbacks, like just those little things that he can do so well. If he can be LA's 4th best player and arguably the 6th best player in the series, which I think is realistic, that again is another thing in LA's favor that maybe makes this closer to a 5-game series than like a 7-game series.
I like it. Yeah, I worry about how long his shot release is at times. He's one of those guys, when I'm logging film and I have to figure out if I'm going to consider a shot he gets open or lightly contested or heavily contested, he, more than anyone else on this team, will get shots that should be open, but they end up being contested by the time he actually gets them off. It just be with how long his form is. So I do wonder if there's ever a point where Minnesota tries to roam off a little bit more and is able, with their length and their speed, to try to recover and at least get a decent contest. Don't know if it'll be the case or not, but yeah, I think his shooting is going to be important. His defense will certainly be important. How well he does defending the rim and boxing out are going to be big factors. The Ant matchup, hey, if LA can shrink the floor, take away the gaps, he's got good enough length and size to kind of be sturdy and hold his own. If they peel away that help defense, I mean, he's still been a good ISO defender this year, but I worry about it a little bit. I try to stay away from the individual matchup tracking data, but it does, it makes me feel a little better. I think he'll play a key role in this. And along those same lines, I was looking at like kind of ranking the players and tiering the players and trying to figure out like, okay, if this guy is playing this well, this is what it would mean. And on the Minnesota side, going to my player X factor for them, I think Julius Randle's that guy. He behind Ant is Minnesota's like clear number 2 offensive option for me, and he's got a strong post game, ISO game. He's a playmaker, and when you look at the rest of their team, it's a lot of guys that are more finishers or it can be facilitators, but they're not necessarily offensive engines in the way that Julius can be as an on-ball scoring option, kind of creating offense for himself and others. I do think this is not a good series for him. I think this is a series where like LA's got 3 different dudes that I think are really good matchups to take him on, between Rui, between LeBron, between DFS. Like they've got the right body types to be able to hold their own against him from my perspective, with the quickness, but also some strength and some low center of gravity. And if he is able to be defended 1v1, that is a huge benefit for the Lakers. I think any successful defense of Anthony Edwards requires extra help, and you give something away when you take something away. But with Julius, if you can truly defend him 1v1, Minnesota's going to have a tough time getting the kind of output from him as a scorer and as a passer, as a playmaker, setting others up to be able to keep up with this high-scoring Lakers group, at least recently. And when I look at Julius and some tendencies for him, it makes me even more bullish on LA's ability to hold him down. In the post, he has some very clear tendencies and handedness, and I mean, we saw that with the Lakers a long time ago, but even still now, he is super left block heavy, and when he's on the left block, he wants to go over his left shoulder towards the middle. On the right block, he still wants to go over his left shoulder towards the baseline. So you kind of sit on the one move. He's still that bowling ball. He'll still commit those offensive fouls that made us frustrated as Lakers fans years back. Or I guess not for you, Jovan. I guess you were covering the Clippers at that point. Was that pre? What were you doing those days?
Mid 2010s.
Yeah.
I was covering both teams. I was doing some baby Lakers work. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well,
but not rooting at that point. I was not rooting.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's probably the right thing to do. I can't claim that moral high ground. Yeah. So his post game is still, it still looks familiar, but he's good at it. But if LA can take it away, and especially if you can take it away with one guy, that's going to be a big thing. And then the ISO game for him, he's also very handed with his approach. He wants to drive left, and when he drives left compared to driving right, he gets to the rim more often. He's a better pull-up shooter, and is just generally more effective. And so if you can shade him towards his weak hand, he's going to try to spin back towards that left side, and I bet LA's going to be able to. I can see like LA switching. We've got Austin on Julius, and JJ's got the right game plan in Austin's head, and he's just sitting and waiting on that spin back and draws an offensive foul. That's probably going to happen at some point this series. So if LA can frustrate him and neuter him as an offensive scoring weapon for himself and facilitator for others, it's going to be a really, really tough series for Minnesota. But if he can do what he usually does and get to the rim and hit some shots and draw help and then kick out, that is going to be a key part of Minnesota's offensive success. So I see him as a key X factor in the series, and one that I feel good about, but at the same time, there's absolutely that potential for him to kick our butts.
Would you rather start Rui on Ant, LeBron on Julius, Jaxson on Rudy, and then I guess Luka on McDaniels, Austin on Conley, or would you rather start Rui on Randle, I guess Austin on Ant, Luka on Conley, LeBron on McDaniels, and then Jaxson on Rudy?
I thought about both of those. I have both of those written down as like viable paths. My mind initially went with the second grouping. That's what I first kind of mocked up.
That's the way I've been leaning too.
I think you want.
I'd rather have LeBron as the helper.
Yes, exactly. If you can have LeBron as the helper, and you can have Rui be the guy that needs to be boxing out and battling down low, I think that's better for LA. I think that saves energy for LeBron and allows him to really expend his energy bar on the offensive end, and allows a role player to be a star in his role, try to take out Julius, try to knock down open threes, and that can be Rui's contribution to the series.
Yeah. That's what we're in alignment. So that brings me to my Wolves X factor, who would be the guy that LeBron is helping off of in Jaden McDaniels. And I think Jaden McDaniels, for me, the Wolves have won the series, and we're doing the autopsy of how LA lost. I think Jaden McDaniels is going to be a big part of the Wolves' success, and it's going to look like something like him hitting 38+% of his threes. Like I think he's going to be a guy that LA helps off of and lives with him making a certain amount of shots. We've seen LA concede threes to non-shooters or guys who are shaky shooters. Post All-Star break, he's shooting 31.5% on threes. Just his ability to make the Lakers pay for helping off of him. I think he will just look at all their supporting cast guys. He's the guy that I think they'll be the most comfortable helping off of. And then defensively, how does he fare against Luka? And has he grown and learned anything from the last series? Or is it much of the same? Because I think him not being on Luka, I think has a certain ripple effect that we've already discussed. And if he can somehow hold his own better against Luka, I think that slots some things in for them defensively that would give them a better chance to win this series. So if he cannot be exploited as much with Luka's deceleration and craft and strength and just him manipulating pick and rolls against him and really using his off arm and step back against him, then I think Minnesota has more of a chance here to hold up defensively. If he can't, and now all of a sudden it's like him on LeBron, and maybe the Lakers are just using LeBron as like a spacer to just get McDaniels out of the fray, or they're deploying him on Austin to try and take Austin out. But like, okay, you could then just move Austin out and make him a spacer. Like, I think there's different ways the Lakers can counter him not guarding Luka. And I just view him as like a guy where I think I know how it's going to go. And that's why I'm favoring LA. But like, if Minnesota is to pull off the upset as the underdog, I think Jaden McDaniels probably has a big series and is really impactful defensively at that all defense level. And then also probably scoring like 12 to 15 points a night, hurting them on cuts and offensive rebounds, and probably shooting high 30s, if not like low 40s on threes.
Yeah, if he can do that, that would be big for them. He has been, I mean, I'm not as worried. I don't know that I wouldn't say that you're worried, but if he is able to do those things, that's an X factor. For sure. Yeah. That is absolutely an
I'm a little worried about the shooting, just because you could always have that randomness with the shooting, but I don't think defensively he's going to be able to hold up against Luka. Like, I think that,
Yeah, if LA can contain and if they're switching, I think I don't think we're gonna see a bunch of threes from him. If he's getting a bunch of 3-point attempts, it's because something else has gone wrong. I think he'll be more of a symptom than a root cause. Now, if he takes advantage, that's bad for LA. But this is a guy that he's second in the entire NBA this season in our 3-point shot quality metric at Bball index. That's not good in terms of like him and his shooting confidence. Of the 250 players, top 250 players this season in spot up scoring possessions, he is 10th lowest in 3-point attempt rate. So when you kick it out to him, he is trying to drive so much more often than just about anybody else. He is not confident taking those threes. And when he does take those threes, they're as open as anybody other than Chris Dunn in the league. And even then on those spot up threes, he's shooting like 36%. So he's, when you shoot 36, you're going to have days where you shoot 40. You're going to have days where you shoot 20. You're going to have days where you shoot 45. That's the nature of 3-point shooting. So if he does have a hot series and it's on real volume, that could be problematic for LA. But if he is doing that, I would say like we had issues at the point of attack, or Minnesota's running help beaters and that pulled away the help defense from LA, and now they are getting the penetration they want, or they're getting second chances and getting kick out open threes. There's going to be something else, I think, to point the finger at, but I'd really be annoyed, I think, if McDaniels does have, a huge impact offensively with the cuts or with the threes, like you said, because that's not his norm. He can do it. If he does do it, that's big for them. So I think that's an excellent X factor.
What's your statistical X factor for the series?
Man, so I spent a lot of time before this podcast looking at Minnesota, looking for a stat I can point to and say, when they do this, they win. When they lose this area, they lose. And I looked at second chance possessions and points. I looked at the possession battle in general. I looked at transition. Nothing really stood out. And so I am going to look internally with this one. And I found an interesting kind of connection with both teams here, and look at the Lakers offense and their offensive scheme. I think every time I'm here, I use this data a little bit because, man, if I am tracking 7,500 plays and writing down 20 data points for each one of them, I'm going to use it somewhere. And for
Hell
those of
yeah.
you who don't know, this is my third season of tracking every Lakers offensive possession. I watch the film, I write down who's on the court, what they did, did they run a play, what kind of play was it, out of what alignment, who got the shot, who was setting them up for the shot, what was the result, all of that, what was the quality of the shot. So it's a lot of work, get some really cool insights, and I'm able to track things that I look at as key factors that are largely controllable by the offense. I've looked at these for the Lakers. I've looked at these for some other teams. I just did a super deep dive at the college level and found the exact same, like almost not the exact same, but very close to the same values in terms of how much these things matter. And it's stuff like how often they run plays instead of freelancing, how often the plays they run match the defensive screen coverage they're facing, how often they counter double teams when the other team is sending doubles on post ups or isolations, the caliber of the play. So a number of different KPIs I look at. Each of those factors correlate to higher offensive quality, possessions, and more success. But when you kind of model them all together, there's some relationships. Like you can run a bunch of plays, but if the plays stink and they don't make sense for the situation, they're not going to do well. So it's not just run more plays and you will win more. You've got to do the other things too. But when you model it all out, I've got an overall scheme score is what I call it. And it has been an excellent way to judge the Lakers' scheme, as well as a very strong indicator for how their offensive output will look. And this season, in the 24 games, they have had an A or an A plus grade in my scheme score. The Lakers have gone 20-4, and they have averaged a 121 offensive rating. Minnesota, exactly, like unstoppable stuff. Minnesota, in games that they've given up a defensive rating of 121 or worse, is 5-10. I mean, kind of impressive for that defensive rating that bad, but obviously good for LA. In the 16 games the Lakers have had a B plus or an A minus, they have been 11-5 with a 118 offensive rating. And when we compare that with how Minnesota's fared in games like that, they've been 3-6. So similar win percentage for them. So if you can get a B plus, an A minus, an A or an A plus, Minnesota's winning about a third of those games, and the Lakers are dominating, combined 31-9. In the 22 games the Lakers have had a C, C plus, B, or B minus, they've gone 11-11 with a 114.4 average offensive rating. So very mediocre team. Minnesota is 9-9 in those games when they have a defensive rating in that range. So if LA's scheme is average to even a little above average, according to this overall scheme score, it's about a 50-50 shot. In the 19 games the Lakers have been at a C minus or below, they have been an 8-11 team this season with a 112 offensive rating. In Minnesota, in games where they've given up a defensive rating at this level or below, is 32-8. So if the offensive scheme for the Lakers is below average, Minnesota's going to kick your butt. That's not good. And when the Lakers are able to really turn things up and control, again, this is controlling what you can control. I understand you don't always know what the defense is going to run on any given play from a coverage standpoint, but you can make informed decisions based on what they did last play. I understand you're not always going to call a set, but I know that LA, when they run sets and ISO, they're more effective than when they freelance stand around in ISO. If you can take help defenders and give them a second job, now your Lukas, your ARs, your LeBrons can actually truly attack 1v1. I know when you run plays that are designed to beat drop coverage against switching, it doesn't work as well as when you play them against drop coverage. So you want to control what you can control, and when the Lakers have done so, they have been a juggernaut. They have been a Death Star. If you see me tweeting out Death Star gifs in the middle of games, you know this is looking good, and you know the Lakers are on the path to victory because they're winning 83% of the time when they do this well, 69% of the time when they do it pretty well, and when it's average or below, this is not an impressive team. This is not a title contending team, and Minnesota facing offenses like that wins games.
You could just ask Chris Finch what he's going to be running. I believe a former head coach once said that in a press conference. But no, I mean, look, I want to give you your flowers on this because I don't think any fan base references offensive organization more than the Lakers fan base. And you are the one leading the charge. You are leading the offensive organization revolution on X and on Reddit and anywhere where Laker fans congregate. So You have been the influencer in terms of how Laker fans view the game offensively, and I see people have started logging it themselves and like tweeting at you about it, and or asking you, or kind of projecting what they thought it was. That was a good quarter, that was a bad quarter, etc. So you've been leading the way with that. And along those lines, I will point to, for me, the big thing is the turnover battle. And if the Lakers are not organized offensively, there will likely be an uptick in turnovers. And I believe there would be a correlation there in terms of offensive organization and turnover rate. But looking at post All-Star break, which for me, I tried to look at again for both teams. Minnesota has been playing some of their best basketball this season, but obviously for the Lakers, that's post Luka trade. Post All-Star break, the Lakers are 25th in turnover percentage. Minnesota is 5th. And that's a significant gap in 20 something game sample size for both teams. So like relatively small, but Minnesota has been taking better care of the ball, because on the season, they are 19th in turnover percentage. So obviously you look at the first 50 something games that they were in the bottom 10 and now have kind of played their way up into the top 20. So Minnesota has been trending in the right direction in terms of their turnover percentage. The Lakers have been trending in the wrong direction. And looking at the season series, again, with all the necessary caveats, both games in Minnesota, LA had 21 plus turnovers. Then their 2 wins, opening night and on February 27th, they combined for 20 total turnovers. So there's a big difference there when they can take care of the ball against Minnesota. And remember, opening night, they shot 5 for 30 on 3. So they did not have a good shooting performance, but they took care of the ball and they won that game. They took care of the ball outside of like third quarter. Minnesota went on a bit of a run and got out in transition a bit, but like they largely took care of the ball in that second LA matchup, and they won that one. So I think LA's ability to handle their ball pressure, handle their length and athleticism defensively, and against the McDaniels, against the Nickeil Alexander-Walker, against Dante DiVincenzo in like dribble handoffs, that's an area where he excels in terms of being disruptive and like poking the ball loose. They have a lot of guys who can make plays defensively. And so limiting those turnovers and not letting them get out in transition, but also from the Lakers side, if they are shading Ant to certain spots on the floor, if they are defending Julius certain ways in the post or around the elbows and able to generate turnovers against those guys, like that allows LA then to get out in transition. So both of these teams like to play a bit slower. Both of these teams are kind of middle of the pack to below average in terms of transition points. If either one can generate a turnover advantage, and that leads to points off turnovers or fast break points or whatever, like that to me is a swing factor.
I love it. And tying together our scheme X factors this season against hedging and blitzing defenses, which again I expect Minnesota to be mostly running, when the Lakers have good coverage fit, meaning they're running a set play that should do well against hedging, for example, double drag or Chicago or zoom action, same thing there where you have a down screen into a handoff. Any of those concepts, those are like 3 of LA's top run plays on the season. And when they have good coverage fit in general against hedging and blitzing defenses, their turnover rate is 12% of their possessions. When they have poor coverage fit, 28%. So there's a bit of a difference there. And
That's
when they're
high.
not running it is very high. When they're not running a play, it's 15%. So if you are running plays, not just in they're getting much higher quality shots when they have good fit versus not running a set at all, but good fit versus poor fit, especially against coverages that put 2 guys in your face, can give you catastrophic results and like pick 6, layup and dunks on the other end. So I am with you. If LA does not have strong scheme, they are going to fail at this element that you just talked about, and it is going to fuel that Minnesota offense and then set back the Lakers offense, because then they're going to have to take the ball out of the hoop and they're not going to be getting transition for themselves.
Then what's your series X factor?
For me, it's how long Minnesota can stay as a hedging and blitzing defense. I think plan A for them, plan B for them, plan C for them, plan D for them will, or at least should be, variations of hedging and blitzing. And part of this is because their path to victory includes that size, winning the possession battle, getting those second chances, having good rim defense. And to do that, I think you need to keep your bigger guys on the court. And if you're going to keep your bigger guys on the court, they do not want to switch with Rudy. He's better than he gets credit for as an ISO defender, but they want all of their guys playing their normal roles defensively. Not just Rudy, but others. When you take them out of doing their thing and ask them to go do a different job, they're not good at it. There are a lot of specialists on this defense. And if they are able to stay with their normal lineups and continue hedging and blitzing instead of having to get to drop or get to switching, this is going to be a longer series. If they are switching, that's a real bad sign for them. And if that's happening in game 1 or game 2, LA will win the series from my perspective. If they are able to hold off on that until like being down 3-0 or something like that, like LA's, or maybe not down 3-0, but if they're able to hold off on switching until like game 4, game 5, game 6, I think they've got a better chance in the series. And I don't think they'll be down 3-0. So if they go smaller, they lose that inherent edge. And this defensive scheme is part of not being smaller and not allowing LA to be the aggressor offensively and be very meticulous in who they choose to attack and how they choose to attack. Create more chaos, create more offense with your defense. I think all of that is part of this approach for them. So how quickly we see Minnesota primarily switching will tell you how the series is going from my perspective.
With that, quickly before I share mine, are you specifically looking at Gobert and Conley and maybe LeBron mismatch hunting DiVincenzo or or Conley as like smaller guys that he could pick on, or Gobert switching onto Luka or Austin on the perimeter? Or are you even talking about like within like Ant and Julius switching if there's a ball screen or something like that? Like when you are referencing them primarily switching, is it just like 1 through 5, or is it more so with I think like Rudy and some of the smaller guys?
I think it's all around. Like Julius, not a good screen navigator, not a great rim protector, but he can ISO defend a little bit on the perimeter. He can try to hold his own against Rui or LeBron. But if you have him guarding an Austin or somebody like that, that takes rim protection away from the rim for them, and puts him in a tough spot as an ISO guy. Naz Reid is someone you can target as an ISO defender, and we did see the Lakers do that in that last matchup, or a couple matchups ago earlier in the season. And someone that I think he's a bit weaker on the as a help defender, and if you can have him on the back line, I'm a lot less worried. So it's pull the big guys out to the perimeter, put the smaller guys on the inside. Of course, Mike Conley, not a good rebounder. Not a good interior defender for a guard, of course, but also someone you can try to attack an ISO. DiVincenzo, you can try to attack an ISO. Neither of those guys good post defenders. So like there are different ways to do it. McDaniels is the one guy that like I don't really see there being like we're not going to go target him. I don't think that's probably a sound strategic approach. Sure. Is someone that on the inside he is certainly vulnerable and has been very poor compared to his peers. So I see this being more than a Rudy thing. I don't want this to become I understand some people going to that because I think that's an easy talking point. It's kind of the reputation. I don't think the reputation quite matches reality. I think more generally, when you take Rudy away from the rim, when you take McDaniels away from the top matchups, things like that, you just kind of break the cogs in this machine defensively that allow it to succeed. And whether it's taking those guys off the court or just making them do different jobs, you discombobulate what they do, and this is a group that'll make a lot of mistakes in those situations. And when you pull up the film where they have been a little bit more switchy, they're just not on a string. They're not communicating as well. You're asking them to do things they're uncomfortable with, and that's when you get good results as an ISO team for LA.
My series X factor is along the same lines, but it's taking a step back and a little bit more of a broader question. Just which team forces the other one to make the bigger front court adjustments? And so certainly the switching is within that, because I think if Minnesota starts switching more or potentially going to more switch heavy looks defensively, and that would likely be no Gobert and either Randle at the 5 or Naz at the 5 with Randle at the 4 or something like that. If they are leaning more into those lineups, I think that's a win for the Lakers. And then if the Lakers we talked about Jaxson a little bit, but also I think you could look at Vando here too. Like if the Lakers are going away from their death lineup, laser lineup, whatever you want to call it, like that, I think JJ has played his hand to an extent of that's the lineup he feels the most comfortable with, has the most confidence in. It's a really good lineup. It's had success. And I think that's the group that he wants to close with. So I almost look at it as like, if you tell me it's game 5, like don't tell me the series score at that point, but tell me it's game 5, 6.5 minutes left. It's a 4-point game. Who are the 5 guys on either side at that moment? And I feel like I could give you an idea of who I think is probably up in the series at that point. So if Minnesota and look, there could also be an element of both teams are just stubborn and like refuse to adjust in terms of playing like, because with Rudy, you mentioned the switching, and I agree. I think his switching, the ability to like target him in isolations can be a bit overblown. I think the bigger thing is just if LA is picking and popping, or if he's going to be on Rui or DFS if they're matching up with that small lineup. And if he's in the corner and he's trying to kind of do both and roam to protect the rim, but also get out to close out to Rui or DFS in the corner, like that can be taxing for him and can be an area that the Lakers test him, similar to when going back years ago when the Clippers had Terrence Mann in the corner, and like on paper, the Jazz were living with that, but like it was hard for Rudy to protect the rim and rotate out to that corner. And with the way that Rui and DFS have been shooting the ball, both guys have been 40+% shooters for a bit here. Like that's going to test Rudy's foot speed and just ability to cover ground from the paint and the rim out to either the weak side corner, the weak side slot, the weak side wing. And then also we've seen LA go at bigs in pick and pop situations. And it's like, okay, so if Rudy's going to be in a drop, DFS is going to pop, Rui's going to pop. Or if they're going to try to do some type of blitz or hedge, then like they can quickly pop there and Luka can make that pass. So I think, again, kind of like looking deeper into the series, which team makes the bigger front court adjustments, because I see that being more of the pivot point on both sides. If LA is able to stay small and hold their own in the paint and on the glass and make threes, then I think this could be a 5-game series. If Minnesota is forced to play smaller and switch more, also a 5-game series. But the inverse is if Minnesota is able to stay big and leverage their size advantage in the interior, then this is where it could go 6 or 7, or Minnesota even wins. So to me, the front court adjustments and who dictates the terms of engagement is the biggest thing, in my opinion.
I like it. And again, I think you looked at the personnel, I looked at the coverages, but I think there's definitely a relationship between those as well. Based on who Minnesota has out there, you can probably guess what they're doing defensively. And based on same thing as with your answer, tell me game 5, 6 minutes to go, what coverages they're in. I think it should correlate with who they've got on the court and would also give me some confidence or some worry on how the series has gone.
What is your series prediction?
So I think this is a really good matchup for the Lakers. I worry about the size of Minnesota, but I don't think Minnesota defensively is built to really slow this Lakers group down. If I'm to look at the Lakers offense and the scheme, which I feel like I know as much as anyone could know, they have been the best at attacking, hedging, and blitzing defenses. And Minnesota is doing that most of the time. When they played Luka last playoffs, it was their heaviest hedge and blitz series of the whole playoffs. And so I think this is what they want to do. LA is so well set up to attack it with the concepts they run and what they've got in the playbook. And I've dug deep to figure out, like, how the hell will Minnesota guard double drag? How are they going to stop these Chicago actions? What are they going to do against LA's bread and butter? I'm not saying, here's the 48th most used play in the Lakers playbook, and that's going to be the difference maker. I'm talking about their number 1, 2, 3, and 4 plays are plays that attack Minnesota's defense well. And digging in and looking around in the film, I saw some adjustments they made, but it's also stuff that LA has easy go-to counters for. I dug into that. I had a visual element on my podcast that I did yesterday. So go check that out if you want to kind of see the X's and O's drawn out. But after digging into the likely tactical adjustments I see, I just find myself ending up at the same eventual landing spot, which is they're going to have to switch at some point. And if they switch, LA's in a really good spot. And I mean, looking at the series favorite, you expect them to win in 5 games or 7 games, most likely, right? You're probably gonna close out at home. I'm feeling this is a series closer to 5 than 7. I was very much between 5 and 6, but looking at everything I've looked at, like I feel really confident. Maybe I'm a little too confident, and it's Lakers in 6, but I'm gonna say Lakers in 5 because I just don't see Minnesota matching up well with this group. I think we're going to make them uncomfortable. I think we're going to take their best player and take away his bread and butter, which is pull up threes against drop. He's going to get 0 of those in this series, or very few of those in this series. We're going to make them work for everything they do. And as long as LA's not getting crushed on the boards, I see them winning the series. And as long as JJ and his group are making the adjustments I expect them to make, and I've seen them make, I think it'll be a quick series. So I'll say Lakers in 5.
I like it. I'm similar to you. Like I've been between 5 and 6. I am going to go Lakers in 6. That has been my consistent pick for the last few days. Like as you said, when you have a home favorite, they typically win in 5 or 7. But I could see this being a 2-2 series that LA wins a pivotal game 5 and then closes out in game 6. I think there's been some growth in Ant's game. And especially as a playmaker and a passer, I also think Julius has looked more comfortable over the last 20 games or so with some of his decision making and playmaking reads. So I think those two guys, especially more so Ant, are good enough to at least get a game. And then I think there will inevitably be one game where the Lakers have like 20 turnovers and maybe like a poor shooting performance. Maybe it's 2 separate games, maybe it's the same game, but like. That's where I kind of give some grace to Minnesota and respect. Like as JJ has noted now several times, they are one of only 4 teams to be top 10 in offense and defense. The other 3 teams all won 60 plus games and are considered largely the 3 best teams in the league in OKC, Cleveland, and Boston. So I think the Lakers are going to win the series. I'm leaning 6.
I feel a lot more comfortable in the Lakers not allowing Minnesota to play Minnesota Timberwolves basketball than vice versa. So like there is a within the range of outcomes, like Minnesota can win. I just, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to them. I think they've been a very good team on the season. I just think they're just such a bad mismatch. But I think 6 is probably this. If I had to put a bunch of money on this, I think 6 is probably the safest bet here. I'm feeling bullish. We'll see what happens. Either way, I think both of us will be pleased with the result if either of us are right, of course. And then it's on to whoever's next. But it'll be a really good test, and I think we'll learn a lot about this team, this first round series. And I think the areas that they might be weaker in, even if the series goes a little bit longer, if it's because of the defensive rebounding, if it's because the small group doesn't match up well with certain opposing lineups, that is going to tell us a lot about the long-term potential of this group getting deeper than this. Because I think this group can win a series or 2. I do have some serious doubts just based on their roster limitations with their big man rotation and just how often can you win the same way and force other teams to succumb to the way you want to play basketball. And I think they've got as good a shot as anyone to do so. But I don't think it's going to worry me this series, but longer term, that's the thing to keep an eye out for. And we will learn quickly whether or not that should be a serious concern or not, I think, based on how they deal with the size of this Minnesota group.
Well, Cranjis, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. It had been far too long. Hopefully, we'll have you on later to preview maybe the conference finals, depending on how things play out for the Lakers. But outside of the Lakers Exceptionalism podcast, which you could get on YouTube, you could get on any audio platform. Anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
Sure. Yeah. If you like this kind of content and you want more than just the weekly public pods, we also have a podcast Discord server where there's a bunch of like-minded individuals that are Lakers fans that want to talk ball, talk actual ball, trash talk a little bit for the other teams. But you can engage with the fun group in there without having Minnesota fans lurking over your shoulder. Within there as well, we have different premium tiers. You can get in the server in general. If you join any of the premium tiers, you pay for any of them, you're in. Once you're in for good. But at the lower bowl tier, we have extra weekly bonus pods, and I mean, we've had 4 bonus pods in the past 4 days, so it's a little bit more than weekly this time of year. We've got bi-weekly Q&A mailbags. Tom creates some fantastic videos, and you'll get early access to those by like weeks in advance within there, especially this time of year. It'll be topical stuff, so you'll want to see that stuff early. At the next tier, if you're interested in learning more about the scheme stuff, I have 24 hours of recorded scheme 101 content, kind of bringing you from A to Z to understand defensive positioning and rotations and coverages and how to attack the coverages and different actions and all sorts of different things. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out and ask. But that's an excellent perk, as well as my half-court offensive tracker for the Lakers. If you want to go back and, after game 1, man, wow, LA kept running that same play 6 times in a row and it was working. What were they doing? You can go in and you can see exactly what it was, how well it worked, when else in the season the teams run it, what their best lineups have been, things like that. So lots of good stuff in there. We have other higher tiers as well with extra content and access, but those are the 2 that I would highly recommend people take a look at, because if you just want to deep dive more to the Lakers or the X's and O's side of the game, I don't think there's a better place to go to get some, meaty content that is very much that nerdy variety. If it's for you, it's for you. If not, I get it. There's so many ways to enjoy this team in this league, in this sport, but if this is what you're looking for, give it a shot.
Recommend you all check it out. And also shout out to Tom. I need to have him on my show. It's been he's been on the lives recently, but I got to bring him on and talk at some point during the playoffs. But that will do it for everyone watching and listening. Thank you all so much. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. A quick reminder, I will be doing a Buha's Block meetup in Santa Monica at Barney's Beanery on Thursday, April 17th at 7 p.m. If you are in the LA area on the west side, that was the location that ended up winning in my YouTube poll. Pull up and let's grab a beer and talk some Lakers basketball. But if you're in the area, you have the time, come hang out with some Laker fans and some Buha's Block fans. It's been cool to see so many of you out in the wild. So check that out if you're in LA.